Love that. All right, I'm gonna be calling the Community Development Commission meeting for January 4th, 2023 to order at 3:32. And can we get a roll call? Tony?
Yes. Chair Villarreal? Can you hear me? Chair Villarreal?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it working, Tony?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
We hear you. I hope you hear me.
Yes. Okay, cool. Chair Villarreal?
Present.
Commissioner Torres?
Here.
Commissioner Watkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Watkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes?
It's the owl. It's not picking us up. Do we need to move it closer?
Yeah.
Okay, did you get Hughes?
Commissioner Hughes? And then online, we have Commissioner Lopez
Here.
and Commissioner John.
Padilla is here.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Padilla,
I am here.
thank you.
We have a quorum. We'll be moving on to the approval of agenda. Are there any changes from? Alrighty. Any other changes? If not, I'm making a motion to accept the agenda. Commissioner Torres,
Second.
second by Commissioner Hughes. Can we get a roll call, Tony?
Yes. Chair Villarreal,
Yes.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Watkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Hughes, Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Padilla,
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you also, for now, make sure that we have Commissioner Marquez as excused?
Yes,
And move on to the approval of the minutes from December 7th, 2022. Were there any changes from staff?
No changes from staff.
Okay, any changes from members of the commission? Commissioner Padilla?
thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a change, but a question. We have these titled as minutes, and they appear more as meeting notes. Is there, minutes typically have a lot more information included in them? Just a question as why we still call them minutes instead of notes?
I think it's just the way we've always done it, but we don't necessarily do verbatim anymore as
Okay.
told to us by the attorney's office. So now it's a summary, so really it probably should say that, but that's what they consider minutes. I don't know why they haven't changed it. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. But we can, at the pleasure of the commission, we can add more detail, we can change the format. You know, this is what the Prime Gov platform wants to have entered, I think.
It's actually a template that we use all the time. The other thing is because meetings are recorded, they consider that also another way to, if you want to hear verbatim details, then you would listen to the,
That's fine. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Padilla. Any other questions or changes? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Padilla will move for approval as submitted.
Thank you. Second, we have a motion by Commissioner Padilla, second by Commissioner Torres. Can we get a roll call, Tony?
Chair Villarreal, Chair Villarreal,
Yes, yes, yes.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Padilla.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, wait, Commissioner, you didn't, list Commissioner Watkins?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Watkins.
Thank you. All right, motion's approved. Moving on to agenda, we have consideration of resolution 2022. We don't have the number yet. It's a resolution adopting the Midtown Community Development Plan for the Midtown redevelopment project, and we have Lee Lugston, who's our Midtown Asset Development Manager with us, and we also have Daniel Hernandez, who are you exactly with, Daniel? I'm sorry, I should know this, but oh wait, you're muted. Muted.
The Midtown Redevelopment Project Manager.
But you're also as your own consultant with which company?
I'm a consultant with my own firm called Proyecto. It's just a sole practice and you're looking at it.
Daniel, sorry about that.
It's all right.
Right, so I'll go ahead and send it over to, do you want to start, Lee, or?
Sure, we didn't really have a presentation per se on this. We are happy to answer questions. We kind of thought that was going to be the format for this.
Did you want to maybe give a little bit of background about how you all decided to do the structure, the way it's presented now?
Sure,
Is there
yeah.
kind
The Council Resolution 2022-12 laid out a number of actions that they wanted staff to take in regards to Midtown. And it was, you know, we're all familiar with master plans and so forth. That's really very much the technical reg kind of document. You know, these are the land uses allowed. These are the design standards, things like that. But we, as a city, wanted to achieve much, much more with Midtown. And this goes back to planning exercises that were done in 2018 and beyond. You know, arguably, you could say it started in 2016 with the Midtown Link overlay, trying to create some unique standards for the area. So in the 2018 planning process, which resulted in the planning guidelines, we started in this direction of having not just a technical regulating document, but also a policy type document that would kind of lay out the city's aspirations for the site. And then specifically Resolution 2022-12 laid that out as a definite plan of action. So they asked staff to pursue both the master planning of the area, the physical planning, and then to do community outreach and so forth to create the community development plan, which once again is the policy document that says, here's how, here are the things we want to achieve on the site that aren't necessarily something that you put in the zoning code or the master plan itself. And we engaged in a long process there. We kind of went on our own with our consultants trying to engage the public, and we kind of got a smallish turnout with sort of the same old people that comment on most everything in town. And we realized we weren't really reaching multi-generational Santa Feans, minorities, etc. So we banded together with the University of Mexico Design and Planning Center, they're called, and they helped us wrangle a bunch of our nonprofit and community serving organizations here in town. And we went through another process of collecting information and really did reach a segment of the community that is not normally heard from in these processes. And basically the input that we gained through our nonprofit and community organizations is what went into the community development plan. So as we worked with them over time, the master plan came out first, and I think some of them were kind of looking at it like, okay, where's the stuff we talked about? And we always told them, you know, you're gonna find it in the community development plan. Really, that's the policy document. That's where we talk more in detail about affordable housing, the possibility of a land trust, the various uses, arts programming, social programming that'll go on the site. So that's how we ended up here. The master plan itself was, and all the related applications was adopted by the governing body on November 30th. And we had originally hoped to bring the community development plan at the same time, basically, but just, you know, things work out the way they do, and it just kind of got delayed. And then we had it set for introduction, but we had a little snafu with upload to PrimeGov, which is always check or it'll delay.
Oh,
Says with the goal of having the community development plan at the governing body on January next week.
can I just add a little bit to that? Thanks, Lee, for giving the overview of how we got here. But typically what happens in redevelopment is when there's a master developer, that master developer executes a document with the city that's huge. And it will articulate not only the goals that are set, policy goals that the city and or community may have, so that when the developer is implementing development, they have certain responsibilities for procuring, locally disadvantaged businesses, women, number of jobs, number of the performance requirements. And so we had anticipated that we wanted to make sure that people heard we heard what people wanted at Midtown. The regulatory land use agreement talks about what can be built on the site, but it doesn't talk about the experience, the social, other sort of policy goals. And so this document is a policy document. The regulatory land master plan tells us what can get built. This policy document talks about how it's built, who builds it, what are their obligations in building it. So we can say that someone has to build a residential unit, but we want to put obligations on that development. So from a technical and policy objective for cities, and particularly for this project in Santa Fe, we wanted to make sure that as development happened, that the objectives, the public policy objectives and the community goals were articulated in a document. And this document will be live. It will probably evolve over time. It may change over time, but it's a way to articulate some of the more social, economic, environmental, and cultural goals that a master plan can't. So again, it's a complementary, it's a companion policy document to the implementation of the master plan.
Thank you for that addition, Daniel. Was there anything else that staff wanted to add about this process or the document that we have before us?
Not offhand, and apologies if you were hoping for more of a presentation. With all the other committees, it's kind of a consent item, and I think we just sort of, as a group, we're prepared to answer questions. So, and we're happy to do that. Or if you'd like, if you have a particular, maybe not necessarily a particular question about something specific in the plan, but you want to hear generally from us about metropolitan redevelopment area or affordable housing or certain topic, we can certainly do that.
We go into questions, Alex or any staff member can articulate how this is relevant to the Community Development Commission and why we're hearing it, and kind of relate our work to this document. We could do that.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to take a stab at that. And I did want to also just add that last night, the Finance Committee, one of the committee members was feeling frustrated that there wasn't more detail about the impacts and the costs, and well, it's so aspirational and it doesn't really pin down who's responsible for what and how it's going to happen. And I realized that we probably hadn't contextualized it quite properly, because what the plan reflects is what came out of all of the community engagement, what we heard the community members say, which what we as professionals felt like was doable and possible. And of course, it's aspirational, because why would you start with a bare minimum? You know, you want to, when you're expressing policy, you want to create a lens through which those kind of hard decisions are made, like and I say hard meaning crunching the numbers and what's the return on investment and blah, blah, blah. So you want this document provides the lens through which those types of decisions are made when we get to the point where we're parcelizing the property and just going through the disposition process. So there, I believe part of the packet is the report from the maps, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can kind of see the parallels and how that work really is put into a policy framework through this document. And I think last night we didn't have a chance to get ahead of that quite fast enough, and for it was understandably, it is a little squishy and it is aspirational, and it does put out lots of ideas, and not every single thing, every single idea, every single strategy is going to happen or going to be used, but it's all there so that we know, and maybe we're missing a couple things, you know, but the point is that it's a vessel to put all of those ideas into. And I think how it directly affects the work of the Community Development Commission is that over the next however many years, the build out of the site, the providers and the nonprofit developers and the for-profit developers and the community services people are going to be looking for money. And they're going to be looking for ways to support their projects. They're going to be leveraging funds based on commitments that the city can make. So projects will be coming in front of the commission to get funding. And so because affordable housing in particular is such an important piece of this project, I expect that this commission will end up being quite familiar with what's being proposed, and will be the voice for saying, wait a second, this particular project seems inconsistent with what the policy goals are that are laid out in this plan. Or I love this project because it just is so aligned and really reflects the community's values, and I think we should fund it. So that's kind of how that fits together.
Thank you. Thanks for that context. So we can start off with questions or comments. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Few commission meetings ago, when we actually were over in the campus, we had the staff attorneys come and present on the subject of adopting a metropolitan redevelopment plan so that you could invoke the state law and allowing you to do certain things for the property, particularly if you could declare it blighted. What's the status of that?
I can jump in. The status is that the legal team is actually putting together a series of presentations and documents, so that there's none established right now, but it will be analyzed through the standard and required state process for establishing an MRA. So they're working on it right now, and that's why it hasn't come out. And so in the community development plan, it talks about the city will analyze the disadvantages and advantages of establishing an MRA. And so that's what's underway right now.
I can add just a little to that, is that Susan Behill, who is on staff with Affordable Housing, and myself have drafted a blight report, which is one of the first things you do in order to make a determination. So we have done an analysis of the area in terms of blight, and we have drafted a report, and the legal team is in the process of looking at that and shaping it up and maybe coming back to us for some revisions and so forth. But I can tell you that the blight report really focuses on the poor platting, poor layout kind of element of the area, more so than like, oh, there's gazillion vacancies and buildings are falling over and so forth. It really does focus much more on kind of the lay of the land and how it's just not really conducive to redevelopment in a meaningful way. It's
That's what I like about the state laws brought up, incomplete streets, okay, yeah.
Right.
that's good.
No, it's a great
This
point.
qualifies quite well for that.
Yeah, and as a case in point, on the campus itself, there's a 10+ acre lot that spans all the way from the east loop road to the west loop road, and it has the Visual Arts Center, Santa Fe Art Institute, Beer Garson Theater, and all the library complex on it. One parcel, so you obviously have to split that up, but within the link overlay, well, of course, Midtown is within the link as well, but I mean, along St. Michael's is what I'm trying to say, some of those little dead end roads that just kind of go in and stop, and there's a cluster of businesses in there surrounded by homes and seas of parking. Those are the kind of things we're focusing on in that Black report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alrighty, so
Follow up to that.
sure.
Is-
Commissioner Soto.
They include Hopewell Man portions of it or all of it, and then also Osage and. Because I thought that
Yes.
was talked about at that meeting. So
Yeah.
that's still the case?
Yeah, I think, well, there were 3 different boundaries considered, and I'm not sure. I don't know, Daniel, do you know, the boundaries have to get determined by council vote, right? With the
Yes.
actual.
Everything does. So a presentation will be made to them and they'll have to, yes, opine and make a vote on it.
We're working with several ideas. There are 2 opportunity zones. So one of them basically is the link overlay itself. So think of only the businesses along St. Michael's and Cerritos, including the campus and including Franklin Miles Park. So that's not technically in the link overlay right now, but that would be included. So the option that seems, among staff anyhow, to make the most sense is the link plus Franklin Miles Park. We have also looked at, there are 2 opportunity zones basically split by St. Michael's and then Cerritos there. The northern one includes Hopewell Man, Casa Linda, right above that. Yeah, and goes up to the corner of St. Francis and Cerritos. So that would include the Hopewell Man neighborhood. We've spoken with community representatives of that neighborhood, and they're not necessarily opposed to being directly with anybody in Casa Linda, but I have a feeling they would not be. Likewise, we've generally heard that the residences in the opportunity zone south of St. Michael's are not necessarily excited. So internally, we're thinking we go with the link plus Franklin Miles Park. And then if Hopewell Man neighborhood organizes and wants to be included in this, they could be added in later. Is kind of thinking right now.
And all of this is still to be determined. We are seriously in the planning phase, so I don't want to go too far down this road without having plans that we can present to the governing body and to the various committees in a much more organized way. If it would be helpful to sort of understand what the community development plan is and how it's organized, we'd be happy to do that so we can focus it on the community development plan. The MRA is to come. We have lots of time to articulate the vision and the purpose of that. But Councilwoman Villarreal, I'll rely on you to sort of direct us on how you would think would be a good way to kind of talk a little bit more about what the community development plan includes.
All I'll add about MRA is that there's many examples of MRAs utilized in Albuquerque, and there's actually going to be a presentation, if I can get the details, about a potential use of MRA in Las Cruces and how what it could look like.
Yeah.
So I think that's open, it's actually for the community members in Las Cruces, but I was thinking of jumping on and I can share it with you all to see if that's something that we could learn from, see like how they're moving forward. So there's learn about MRAs and what the potential is there. So
Yeah. Dina and I, Dina Belzer from Strategic Economics and I worked with Las Cruces a little bit on analyzing their MRA and some, but anyway.
good to know. So you're not presenting over there?
Nope. Dina did at the beginning for a while, but I was just helping out.
Thank you, thanks. So in terms of like questions that you all have, or just like clarification or things that you liked or didn't like, the floor is open if you want to just share thoughts or you have specific questions about the document.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Lopez.
I mean, I may be showing my ignorance, but I don't think I've seen the document. Did we get it and I just missed it?
It's huge.
It's
Madam
exhibit
Chair,
D.
yeah, it was, a link was sent, right, Cody?
Yeah, it's too big.
Oh, okay, I was being ignorant, sorry.
Daniel together a basic presentation. It's not formalized and finalized yet, but we are going to need one for governing body. So if it's helpful, especially if some members miss the plan, we could, Daniel has offered to kind of queue that up as well. It would review like the sections and things, I believe.
Yep.
Since I'm the one that missed it, I would bow to the rest of the commission.
Did you all want to take a look at it as we're referencing certain sections, or if you have questions, we can go to certain pages? I mean, we had this special meeting specific to this, so it was really wanting to just get your thoughts on anything, and I can share that with the governing body or through our committee process if there's something relevant that needs to be discussed in our forums or our spaces. So that's really why we had this meeting, is to have a special conversation, see if there's anything that you want to highlight or had questions for staff.
Excuse me.
Done.
Oh,
Madam
John.
Chair.
Commissioner Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, it's a very lengthy document, 200 pages. It's a lot of reading when you see it for the first time, if that's what I'm looking at.
No, you may be looking at the master plan.
Yeah.
The
The
community
resolution is pretty, the resolution itself is pretty, easy, is a pretty easy read. I don't have an issue with it. But I think the final report was also part of the link. Is that what we're discussing? Is that what you want comments on?
No, Commissioner, Madam Chair, members of the commission, in your packet, what we were trying to do is provide a lot of the background information that point, and that is what that Midtown Campus Project final report was.
Okay,
The document itself, the community development plan, was exhibit D in your packet, and it's a 36-page document. Yeah, that Midtown Campus Project final report was from 2018, as were the planning guidelines. The most current documents would be the community development plan, which is exhibit D, and then exhibit C is the DPAC and our Midtown Engagement Partners report that informed the community development plan.
So what you're seeing is it's all put together in one, the 200 pages is, our packet is actually separate in PrimeGov, and I think the public version of PrimeGov you all can access and you can see them individually instead of having to scroll through all 200 pages, because some of it's background info and some of the things that came up in public engagements, like previous ones, like way at the beginning. From like 2018, and then it goes through essentially, Commissioner Padilla, the actual plan itself is on page, where does it start?
That's what we were trying to look for too, is where does the actual community development plan start in the full pack?
I think it's page. Does it give a page number? It's the problem. It's towards the bottom for sure. It's the last like 36 pages. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Starts on page 158.
So I guess at this point, I have my own questions, but I'm waiting till we have our meeting tonight just because it's more pertinent to our committee work, but
I have a
Commissioner
question
Todes.
that's kind of keys that were already, that went out. Has there been any response? And if so, what's that looking like? Can you comment on that or?
I'm Commissioner, Madam Chair, and Commissioners, Daniel, I don't actually know the answer to that. I know I can't name names, but
do we need to be remembered which RFPs went out? So everybody is on the same page?
I didn't hear the full question. I'm sorry.
Where we, basically, what were the RFPs that have gone out? And if we've been receiving responses to them so far, without divulging details about who and what.
So the 3 RFPs that were released in December were for the Visual Arts Center, the Garson Performance Theater, and the Garson Production Studios. And they were released. And there were, the first thing that we did in December also, Lee led a site tour of each of those. And Lee, I believe you said that there was about 12 in each of those tours, and they range from actual potential respondents to their project team members. So it was hard to tell just how many responses we'll get at this point. But then by the end of December, we heard from several respondents that they would like us to extend the RFP due date period for 30 days. So now it's due now at the beginning of March versus the beginning of February. And so we'll be, I think this month we'll begin to identify who the more viable respondents are going to be. So we don't know quite yet. We know leading up to it that we were getting several questions from potential respondents, particularly for the arts, the film production studios. And I'm hoping that we'll get some really good competitive responses for that, for all of them. But we were nervous about it not getting on the street well with the studios, but we think that it actually is circulating well.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions about that? Okay. Any questions, clarifications? Do you want to share? Anything you like? Anything you don't like? I think it would just be helpful to have some information about things that struck you, that you thought were important, that we added or that were added in the document. Commissioner Cotis?
One thing that has bothered me from the beginning has been the statement of allowing all income level housing for all income levels. And to me, that seems a little bit out of whack, simply because we don't need higher end housing at this point. And so our biggest need is mid-level and low income level housing. So that for me has been a statement of discomfort, I should say. And I think that should really be rethought or reconsidered. Why do we need higher income for the campus? Higher income housing for the campus? And I mean, I've heard you talk before, Alex, about, you know, what happens when we can create different tiers. But I've also seen reports from other cities and other communities that have the same problem. And they have really changed their thinking about prioritizing what the real need, where the real need is. And like, for instance, I've gotten on the Acequia Lofts webpage to see what their income levels have to be able to afford living there. And they're much higher than what the people that have had to move out of the city for housing reasons is. If we look also at the South Meadows, it's the same kind of issue. So there's a lot that has been constructed that serves the needs of higher income level people. We still end up with the same issue for lower income and middle to lower income housing needs. And that just makes me nervous and makes me, it makes my head spin.
So, Madam Chair, if I can respond, I think, and this is an interesting point, Daniel. When Daniel and I talked about the affordable housing section of this plan, when we said housing for all incomes, we meant including poor people. We weren't saying including rich people. Like, we were actually, our bias was to deepen affordability and to ensure that there was that was part of it wasn't just what's the return on investment. Cheap housing doesn't pay, we're not including it. It was, that's where we start. The role of the more expensive housing is to make the project financially feasible, but it's also to add other amenities, because we know that higher end housing can afford to do more. So they can afford to have a community space, they can afford to create a higher level of energy efficiency, and they're gonna get held to that standard. But the implication is not that we're suddenly, that we're, oh, let's make sure we get all the rich people living there. The market's gonna tell us what that pricing is gonna be, because I think, to your point, the market might get saturated for that higher end rental, and that may not be, developers aren't gonna build for renters or buyers who want to be there. So they may start shifting their delivery model as well. But what we're focused on is to ensure that the part of the market that needs extra support is included and is supported.
Anything on that?
I will stay where I'm at right now.
I mean, we're stuck with capitalism and we have to try to make it work for us. But Daniel, you've done a lot of work in really expensive communities. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think the issue is the and what we did in the plan was establishing the base of where we want to be. 30% of your whole housing stock that's going to happen in Midtown is going to be affordable to different income levels, whether it's a working family or someone who's extremely low income. We wanted to make sure that range was there. But like Alexandra said, we want to make sure that, the viability or the feasibility of a city is dependent on a diversity of household types and household incomes. So, we treat large scale projects like a master plan at Midtown similar to that ideology, which is to create a diversity of housing types and housing affordability so that you have a real thriving dynamic community going on. But again, establishing that baseline is, like Alexandra just said, we're playing in a capitalist market, but we're telling the market that we're at least 30% of those units have to be affordable. And that's a big step. And we're excited about establishing that within the community development plan.
So would it be helpful for the commission to look, Daniel could run through part of his presentation or point out the parts of the plan that he wants to highlight? If that's helpful, or?
I mean, I think it would be helpful just to kind of highlight some of the things that were added. I mean, one in particular that I'm happy to see was the housing vouchers and fair housing. That was my concern, because there's some places here in town that don't accept vouchers, and no one's requiring them to. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that, what that section looks like. And then the other thing is there's different methods for implementation, and it doesn't get into details to like how. All we say is solicitations, direct negotiations, distance agreements. Did I miss what do you call it? An appendix that explained those things?
Well, I'm not sure, but I'd love to hear how we might strengthen it. We inserted that section that talks about land disposition or property disposition at Midtown and how will it occur, either through RFP solicitations or direct negotiations. And so during those moments, whether it's through an RFP or through direct negotiations, we will require certain performance standards, whether it's around green, whether it's around affordability, whether it's around the type of tenancy in a particular commercial building. But those all will be included in each RFP, and if it's a direct negotiation, it will be that direct negotiation as well. So I would, if you have thoughts about ways that we strengthen the disposition section of the plan, I'd be happy to hear edits or critiques of it, and we'll try to strengthen it. So, and then the third piece that you mentioned was the agreements. So once the respondent has been selected and we negotiate an agreement for the disposition of the property, there's a large agreement that gets created that allows the city to monitor and manage the agreements that we've achieved. So again, if it's around affordability or around green, that agreement will stipulate what the developer is required to do. And there's the city has an opportunity to make sure that the developer doesn't take back the property. There's fines, whatever it is, but the development agreement will articulate what it is that the city has available to cure any deviations from that agreement.
I think what we're not seeing in here, which for me, I'll speak for myself, I want to see them, like I want to see the RP, I want to see that agreement, I want to see how it's structured so that we have this like requirement, certain requirements that prioritize like what we're talking about, affordability, and then giving options for them. And based on how deep the affordability becomes, that's how we would balance it off with like actually providing less for the cost of the land. So there's like, I think that's what I am excited to see, because when I read this, I'm like, yeah, I like all the ideas. There's certain things that I'm like, but how is that gonna work? Like how we're gonna operationalize it.
Yeah.
Seeing, because this is just kind of a structure of like aspirations and potential ways for implementation, and then the proof is in the pudding is in those details with the RFPs, I think, when we get to that point. And I think that's what like the anticipation for me is like, I want to see those, make sure that they like meet what my values and what we're trying to meeting our affordable housing needs. I think that's just, I guess that's more just a statement. I don't know how to make the change. Other when we reference the methods of implementation, I want to see that, like, where are the solicitations, where are the direct negotiations? Did we describe?
Well, you know, one of the things that we did in both plans, the master plan as well as in this plan, was to be able to provide the flexibility for city council, for the governing body, to make decisions along the way. And the dynamics of community will change over the next, the course of the implementation of the master plan over the next 10, 15 years. And so we wanted to have the community development plan at least articulate the policy goals that we know are important today. And so we imagine that one RFP may really, focus completely in on affordability. The next one might push the market and say, we want to see the greenest building design around health and green. And so but we wanted to articulate to the people who have been involved in, the vision for Midtown, that we heard you, and we're going to include these things as we move forward. So each RFP creates a new opportunity to incorporate the various strategies that we've included in the community development plan. And then when we were wanting to be as specific as possible, which is probably around on the affordability piece, that, we were setting baselines for the term. So how many years they were required to maintain affordability, and also the amount of units that we would be monitoring and making sure that got built there. So it will be, there will have to be staff dedicated to managing and monitoring. Going back to the community development plan, are we, what's the strategy here? Can we put this into the next RFP? Those kinds of things will continue to evolve over time. So so each RFP will look a little differently. Each one will have its own set of priorities that we want to see on that site.
Thank you. I think what is missing, and I only know it because we've talked about it, but there's no way to, if someone were to read this document, know what solicitations, direct negotiations, and all those terms, they're actually like they're actual documents. They're not just ideas. They're actual documents, but we don't explain it anywhere in the.
Okay.
Don't say, oh, in the ways this will be implementation is through solicitations. What does that mean? What's it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even if they're not fully fleshed out, they're not explained at the top, so then you go down to methods of implementation, you're like, where are the solicitations? That's why I thought I missed a.
Okay.
Where's that appendix that explains all this stuff, because. Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, that's a really great idea, Daniel. What do you think about creating a section in the beginning that talks about
Operationalizing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I think it's good. The more that we can make this document accessible, I think the better. So yeah, let us try to let us take a stab at that.
Really like that idea, because I think we take it for granted. You know, I know what a weighted RFP is. You set out your criteria and you get more points if you achieve the public policy goals than if you don't. And then you get more favorable terms if you score higher in those weighted areas. But I can, hearing the conversation, it feels a little abstract. And I think perhaps that's what Councilor Lindell was struggling with a little bit last night.
Yep.
So maybe we do have just kind of here's how the operationalizing of this works. Very beginning of the document, and it defines all the terms. It talks about the process, it talks about what a weighted RFP is. And then it also talks about all the oversight that will be ensured through that process
Right,
as those RFPs hit the ground. It's not just something's happening over there, you know, it's an actual conversation every time we're making a policy decision.
the place that you could make more details is on page 10, because you do define like, oh, these are the 4 elements.
Mhm.
And then within this community plan describes the following: the intent, and all of those should be highlighted or bolded: intent, methods for implementation, and strategies. And then, but underneath those, maybe give more detail, like underneath methods of implementation, you'll say that could be solicitation, all these potential, like what will processes that we'll need to be able to actually implement.
Mhm.
Appendix
Okay.
to that,
Perfect.
give a lot of detail about that, so. Let's see, I just want to note that Commissioner Marquez joined us. So she is present, that she came in at 4:18. Okay, so.
2:50.
That's a wrong clock. So what else, I don't know if you wanted to describe any of those pieces, Daniel, about the affordable housing section.
Do you want to focus on the affordable housing section?
I mean, I think a lot of us are interested in that.
Okay.
Is there something else that we didn't get to that people didn't raise their hands about that we want to clarify? Commissioner Padilla or Commissioner Lopez?
Right, yeah, so Alex and I worked hard on this section, particularly because we knew that it was probably the housing affordability was what we heard throughout the process, but we heard it from so many different perspectives. One was just, you know, I can't afford living in Santa Fe anymore and I may have to move and not work there. The other one was that income wasn't going up as much as quickly or at the same rate as housing was. And, you know, I see the demographics of our city changing and how we make sure that housing affordability is in there. We're seeing deterioration of our communities, meaning the demographics of their communities are kind of diluting because people can't afford to stay in their communities and stay in Santa Fe. So, and also fears of displacement. So we wanted to, in the intent section, to really try to hit home on what we were trying to do around equity and affordability at Midtown. And it was a multiple ways of doing that. One was to basically include housing affordability. We wanted to make sure that there was a lot of different housing choices for different family and household types. And we also wanted to figure out ways as we move forward through RFPs of strengthening local capacity to build model type projects at Midtown. So we heard a lot about, for example, a housing trust, a land trust. We heard about different types of co-housing scenarios, but we don't have developers that are doing those kinds of models. So we wanted to begin writing RFPs that would help incentivize the market in that direction. And so we just, again, the intent is these big objectives. When we got into the more strategy pieces, which, well, how are you going to achieve those intents? We started being much more specific. So that's when we established the minimum baseline of 30% of all units built in Midtown will be affordable. And so that will be something that we will continue, the city will continue to monitor. It may come out of, we may have more affordability at some points in the development process, less, but by the end, that 30% of all the units will be affordable. So we project that there will be anywhere between 900 to 1,100 units built at Midtown. So let's just use 1,000. So at least 300 of the units will be affordable to low income and very low income households. And then we basically then, because we got asked questions, well, how are you going to do that? So it's multiple ways. We plan on dedicating at least 4 parcels for the development of 100% affordable housing projects. We know that housing finance is very competitive, and the way that Santa Fe can be competitive in going after that financing at the state level through the low-income housing tax credit program is to have subsidized land, and that project is 100% affordable. It begins to get higher points in the ranking system to secure those low-income housing tax credits. So we're dedicating 4 parcels. We want to monitor the inclusionary housing program. Again, we'll use the existing inclusionary housing program. But again, if we're getting out of balance of that 30%, and we want to catch up, then we may issue RFPs in the future that will increase the requirements of inclusionary housing in a particular project. And we'll continue to push the market in that direction. We'll have to play with land value, because the more affordability, the lower the land value. But those are decisions that the governing body will have to make. Are they willing to lower the land value in order to get higher affordability? Those basic questions will be presented to the governing body as we dispose of properties into the future. So those are the ways that we're planning on getting to that 30% baseline. And on page 16 of the plan, it talks about how we're gonna do that. We also, the housing voucher was another issue too. And based on your request, Councilwoman, I did a lot of research of ways that cities are dealing with housing voucher discrimination around the country. Some cities are actually passing legislation making it illegal and using the fair housing law as the basis for that. Santa Fe isn't there right now. The governing body could think about doing that at some point in the future, but we can at Midtown monitor it. And so we wanted to make it clear, we will make it clear in residential RFPs that the city will be monitoring discrimination, and we will prohibit property owners and property management companies from discriminating based on using vouchers as a source of income to pay housing costs. So we'll make that very clear in the RFPs. And again, if the governing body decides at some point that they want to take a much more deeper, more legal approach, that's something that the governing body can do as something for the city at a broader scale. And then finally, and within the equity section, well, there's 2 things. One is we wanted to try to facilitate the participation of local businesses and nonprofits in the development of affordable housing. So we will incentivize by points in the RFPs that we want to see joint ventures. We want to see anything that can help begin building a infrastructure of corporations, nonprofit and for-profit corporations, development firms that are focused on mission-oriented development, particularly around housing affordability. The final thing was the neighboring communities said, well, we know that development is going to have an impact on our community, on our neighborhood, the physical as well as the social dynamics of our neighborhood. And so the community development plan commits the city to issuing an RFP in the near future for a neighborhood stabilization plan. So they would use a similar framework that we use with the Midtown Engagement Partners, in which a planning firm would coordinate and help facilitate with local organizations to create a neighborhood stabilization plan. The community development plan articulates a few key questions we heard from people that they wanted answered. What tools are available right now, and what tools don't we have that we want to use for stabilizing our community? People wanted to ask questions about how we might create a development without displacement overlay district, what that looks like, what it might include. This was an idea that came out of some work that Chainbreaker and the city did with Policy Link, and Alexandra was involved in that. So just some key questions that people said, like, this stuff comes up, but no one ever follows through. So the idea of creating a neighborhood stabilization plan where these priorities and these strategies can actually be thought through and hopefully funded can happen in a much more coherent, focused way. So anyway, that's the way that the equity section of the community development plan is organized.
Thank you, Daniel. So,
Yes.
Mr. Watkins, I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Did you have a specific question on some of those points or other?
One
Questions?
question on one of the things he talked about early on, but kind of a more generic question. I mean, if we really want to, well, to back up, and I'm sure this will piss off everybody that's worked on the, it's very traditional and conservative the way I read it. And as I read through it, I kept thinking, okay, where's the leadership here? And I think, to find leadership, but I think about what Rosalind Carter, you may remember this, said. Somebody asked her one time, and she said, a good leader takes people where they think they want to go. A great leader takes people where they should go and convinces them, excuse me, that's what they need to do. And that's what's missing in this to me. I mean, if we really want to make some major changes, we need to look at, land ownership. And there's a great opportunity there to look at that. And I don't really see that we're doing that. So I'm interested in in terms of the affordable housing component. Why was there no interest in really pushing the envelope on land tenure and other things? I mean, it's a great plan. It's very traditional. It's what's going on everywhere in the country, as far as I can tell, and it's not really solving the problem. So somehow we need to push the envelope, and that takes leadership. And please don't be offended by this, really, but it just, I look at this as such a great opportunity, and we're going to do something with it, but are we going to do something great with it? I don't see it in this plan. Anyway, it's just
my only response would be, thank you for that. I think that we tried to push the envelope as much as the envelope could be pushed at this current moment. And again, what we wanted to do was to be as flexible as possible, so that as we continue to push the market in new directions, and when I use the term market, I'm thinking about, potential partners, industry and development, but we continue to push them in a certain direction. So we did talk about land trusts, we did talk about co-housing, we did talk about different models, but they don't exist right now. And so, and at some point, it could be next year, it could be 10 years from now, it could be 5 years from now. We also left open the potential for, if a big, housing trust developer comes in and says, look, we want 10 acres, we can do that 10 acres. So we didn't want to restrict ourselves. And that's actually what I think is the entrepreneurial sort of creative thing about this plan, is that it isn't conventional. It didn't dictate the use of every parcel. It allowed for ingenuity to happen within certain parameters. And those parameters were set by what people wanted to see. They didn't want to see a Kmart there. They wanted to see small businesses. They wanted to see different types of housing. So we set those parameters, but how it gets built is what this community development plan does. And we try to articulate different ways that it might happen. So if we wrote an RFP tomorrow, we want a 10-acre housing trust fund or a trust developer to come in, we probably would get no responses because it doesn't exist. So again, we're just trying to push the market forward and hopefully we begin pushing it in ways that other parts of Santa Fe can be developed in similar ways by developers who are doing creative, thoughtful things around community development and community organizing, et cetera.
Commissioner, were you finished, Commissioner? Are you done? Commissioner Torres.
Okay, so my question is, do we have an idea of what the size of the 4 parcels for 100% affordability are? And related to that, have you thought of what the density for those parcels would be? Because we had a presentation that talked about what density has to be like in constructing affordable housing in order to start to make a dent. So,
Madam Chair and Commissioner Torres, I can answer that a little bit because we did look at like what are the minimum densities to achieve both the kind of urban form that we think that the site can support, as well as they're really high. So there's going to be, I think the lowest density was, I'm not even remembering the lowest one, but I know that there was a 59 units per acre. HomeWise is building a 59 unit per acre townhome project in Albuquerque. So it doesn't have to be a high-rise apartment building.
Sure.
You know, it can be done in lots of different creative ways. So it's going to be very high density, but it's not going to feel high density.
and will the density be the same for different tiers of affordability? Or the greater density will be all pushed to the lower income?
Well, I don't think so, because the housing models, the financing models that rely on the subsidy don't actually, there's kind of a sweet spot where they work, and it's not 60 units per acre. I think Siler Yard is, what is it? It's 12 maybe. And because it has a lot of open space. The idea here is that we can have less open space within the parcel because the entire property is dedicated to lots of accessible open space and pathways and different outdoor shared open spaces. So that's the advantage we have, because we have the whole where we can design the whole, the public use of the whole property first, and then the individual projects can fit in around that.
Thank you.
Any other comments or reflections? Commissioner Hughes.
I'm just curious, what do you want from us today?
Well, Daniel, I feel like we just got something
You want a motion
really,
to approve, or
well,
To support
Support it, or-
the
Yeah, I think
resolution as written.
you're recommending. Really, the most important thing from us as a practitioner perspective was having this conversation of how do we clarify that
Operation.
today. I can't say it today.
Operationalization.
But to really describe, like, how do you weight that criteria so that when the property, the tool we have to dispose of the property, which doesn't always mean selling or giving away, it also can mean holding it in a leasehold. How does that tool work? So I think that's super, super important for us. I think you guys are an advisory committee, so you can make a recommendation that the plan be amended based on comments like yours. Moved, presented to the governing body for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Padilla, I think you had your hand up. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. The comment I made earlier about 200 pages, it was a combination of all the information that was sent, Cody had provided us that link. It wasn't individual items. So I was able to follow along with the items that that you were referencing as you were presenting, Daniel, in our earlier. So thank you for that. One question that I did have for you was in looking at the Midtown report and just going through it again, I noticed that there was, the idea of city offices being located on this was not a very high priority. Is why is the reason it seems that it would be more centrally located, geographically center of Santa Fe? What was the reason behind the city offices not wanting to be transferred there? Just a brief statement would be fine.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the 2018 planning process, but my understanding was that people didn't want to see a city hall and then sitting in the middle of Midtown for fear that it would just become a civic plaza and nothing more. They wanted a 24/7 dynamic urban neighborhood. But what did happen this year was people said, we might consider it, maybe not in the center of Midtown, but if it became more of a building that was integrated into the community that had actually a life, on the weekends or in the evenings. Maybe there was some other types of spaces within a government services type building, but it didn't feel like the old city hall kind of structure. So it sort of came out, and there was several people this last fall that said, yeah, we would love that because we will, it's right here in our neighborhood. And so people thought it was, there was several people that thought it was a good idea. The notion that it would be on the Midtown site is not being considered right now. The city owns adjacent parcels. And so it would be adjacent parcels to this Midtown site that would be considered for potential government services building.
Okay, thank you.
Little bit to that too, because I think part of what was happening in 2018 was that the county was rebuilding its building downtown. So there was a prevailing sentiment too, well, if the county can do it, the city should do it because we like this idea of City Hall being downtown. But I think also people were bringing the vision they had for a governmental building was all those big state buildings along St. Francis and Cerritos that are the big, huge box plunked down in the middle of the big, huge parking lot, and nothing else happens there except for defeated bureaucrats driving to work and parking, trudging into their offices. Just kidding. So I think there was a sense like, no, we want better for our community than that. And so when we started talking about this whole multi-use idea and different buildings having, a powwow ground being used for powwows, but also used for company picnics on the 4th of July or whatever. And when we started talking about all these uses, because, it is a finite area, but if it's designed right, like everything can have multi-use and be accessible to different groups of people at different times for different reasons, then I think the public sentiment started changing, like, oh, I could kind of see how that could work and be a benefit. And if I don't have to drive downtown and try to figure out parking, maybe I'd go to a city council meeting, or maybe if there was a community health center, I could take care of that and get a business license at the same time. Like kind of this idea that it doesn't have to be that big, huge block that's in the middle of a parking lot.
Right. Plus, we actually have quite a few city offices there now. Not all those buildings will stay there, but it probably would make sense for some of those buildings to continue being city facilities. So we'll see. Given that we have to leave in about 5 minutes to make it to City Hall for our other meeting. Yeah, right. Our clock over here is absolutely wrong. It's 10 till 3. So considering the comments and opinions and perspectives about the plan, what is I guess I'm curious what you all would like, how you would like to move forward as a CDC body.
Well, can I get clarification first on, somebody already asked this, what exactly do we need to do? Do we need to make a recommendation to the governing body that we like this document as is and they should, we support adopting it, or do we want to make a recommendation that says throw in better definitions for these several things, and then I'm just not
Yeah.
clear where we go with this.
So Madam Chair, Commissioner Watkins, generally advisory bodies are set up to have this kind of conversation that can be in depth about a policy issue. In this case, this group also has the funding recommendation responsibility for specifically for CDBG, but we've expanded that to also include local funds as well as housing policy decisions that are made. So any final decision isn't made here, it's always a recommendation to the governing body. So, and if you guys said, we hate this plan and we think it should be burned, the governing body could say, we don't care what you think. That's CDC, we're gonna approve it, you know, so it's not, I think it's just, you're making a recommendation to consider what we've talked about today in terms of having better clarification on that issue of, I'm not even trying to say the word this time, but blah, blah, blah. And just making that clear because that's important that the public in general knows that there's a way that we can achieve these policy goals is through these tools and what does that look like?
So we want to suggest that whoever does this stuff, add clarifying language about these three procedures that can be used, I don't know what to call it, opportunities.
Right,
Okay,
yeah, or anything else that you think, like, if there was anything specific that you felt like needed to be strengthened in the document. If there was specifics versus like, you had a more general statement, and we can't really say, generally, we think this, or you think that it's conservative and traditional, but without giving any like specifics about how to make that change.
Well, and
it's gonna change.
I
so
think
that-
the value of the conversation too is
Yeah.
that Councilor Villarreal is on the council. So now she gets to say, hey, the CDC had this great idea, or they really talked about this one thing that I want to ask is, and then that decision is made specifically to include the language or include the section or clarify whatever.
Yeah, like the all income levels, like all the things you brought up, I will bring up again as some of the things that were brought up in this body. For our meetings, for our committee meetings, which is basically this after or evening, I'll probably have time to bring it up again or in the governing body, but next week is when this plan will go to the governing body. That's not a public hearing, right?
Well, I think they've changed the way that the agendas work now, so legislation does have
Not
its own
resolutions,
sections,
but we,
but they have
But they
had
have
hearings
this.
with resolutions.
so we probably,
so,
I don't know where it's gonna be, but it probably should be
Yeah,
in that section. Although it's been on our consent agenda, so I'm kind of wondering if we should change that up. Because I know there'll be people, just like the master plan, even though that was specific, like ordinance changes. I don't know if this should be actually, maybe that's a recommendation, that this should be a public hearing for our meeting on the 11th, even though we have a crazy public hearing section already. But I still think it would be important because then community members could talk about, you know, just like what all of you said. Or, yeah, so that could be a recommendation. It's however you want to frame it. It's really just a recommendation and the things you'd like to see either added or changed.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Lopez?
Yeah, just one more thing. I would like to strongly agree with the things that Commissioner Watkins said. I mean, we have a crisis, 17,000 units that we don't have, and I'd like that to be strongly highlighted.
Was that
Actually,
Commissioner Torres?
I think it's
you mean?
Commissioner Torres. who said that.
Commissioner Watkins, when you said we want something different, that it was your comments that I'm strongly in agreement with. I mean, I assumed that what you were referring to, Commissioner Watkins, was that we heard last meeting that we're missing 17,000 housing units in the city. And that somehow that should be, you know, that the plan, as you see it right there, and I did skim through it once I finally found it, is, yeah, it's the same old, and there's fabulous work that went into that, and I have great respect for everyone who works on it, but we have a crisis. And we're gonna do the same thing over again. So I just wanted to, I think Commissioner Watkins said it much better than I am, but I want to agree with that strongly. Thank
Was
you.
that 17,000 you said coming from the county plan?
Yes. That's what I thought she was referring to.
Is that what you're referring to?
Well, what I was referring to is that we're taking a very traditional approach to a great opportunity in Santa Fe. And we could be looking at a lot of, new and innovative ways to address the 18,000, the need for 17,000 additional units. And anyway, I think Commissioner Torres actually started talking about this, and maybe if Commissioner Lopez is okay, Commissioner Torres could throw a few things in that are what started this whole conversation.
Okay,
Sure,
But you-
absolutely. Yes.
okay, thank you. I think Commissioner Padilla had his hand up and then Commissioner Hughes.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes.
Madam Chair, for the record, I disagree with the statement that this is not creative. I think there's a lot of creativity here. 59 units an acre is very creative in itself. And to get that kind of density, you don't get off the street. I also wanted to note that in yesterday's paper, they added up if you add up all the apartment units built or planned to be built, 4,000. So we're healthy, we're doing a really good job. This would be another 1,000. We probably come up with another 1,000 along St. Michael's pretty easily. So we can get there, but don't expect the Midtown campus to be the end all be all for everything. It can contribute, and it should contribute in a creative way. I would recommend to support this, but it's up to you, Chairwoman. How would you like to proceed? Do you have enough information from us today to take it to the next committee?
Sure, yeah, I wrote down the comments, and then the fact that there's different perspectives. And I have different perspectives too, the fact that there's certain things that were in here that we never talk about, which is a big deal to me. And to me, that's innovation and also not taking a traditional approach, because there's things in here that we never have talked about that are finally being talked about.
Here.
And they will require, no, in the
Sorry.
plan,
No,
they're actually talking about it in the plan. And that we're gonna have to operationalize it through not just these processes, but also policy. There's things that I'm gonna be doing that will be hopefully move forward, we'll see. That are different from what this is stating, so. There will have to be probably legislation that comes alongside with this in different ways.
Yeah.
So, but it's up to you all. I'm just sharing. So it's up to you how you want to articulate that. That you approve it, or you think it needs to be thrown out completely, or you think there's parts of it that really make sense, and these are the things that you want to emphasize that need strengthening or need to be followed up on, or I don't know how you want to. Commissioner Otis, did you have a?
Well, I think, we should recommend moving forward, but with continued clarification of definitions, processes leading up to policy developments, and continued participation by community groups and community members through being able to go to the meetings where public testimony can be given. So I think that would, for me, it would have greater meaning than to just say, I agree with the plan.
Was that a motion? So it sounded like it.
Second.
All right. Did everyone get that? Did everyone get that? How that was articulated, that it would recommend moving this forward with continued clarification.
On definitions, processes, policy development to back up everything that's in the plan. Participation, ongoing participation of community members and community groups. And being able to continue to give input during the city council meetings.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's almost the community oversight piece that we had sort of envisioned the MRA commission, because it would have the community advisory role as well. attached to it.
That's a piece of it. for
But
sure.
that's, so it's also that governance piece that we need to be maybe more clear about.
Okay, so that was a motion. We have is that a second from Commissioner Hughes? And I will say that there's counselors that think this is too, what would be the word?
Radical?
Oh, my God.
That's all we'll say. So,
Sorry, I know what you mean.
Mr. Watkins. did
Do you want to
have a-
include in the motion anything about the 3 areas that you want to have better defined?
I think that's the continued clarification on definitions.
Okay.
Covered that
Definitions and processes.
and processes. I had that too, yeah. All right, so any other questions or clarification, comments?
We need a vote.
Yes, we're gonna vote. This is our recommendation as a recommending body. Tony, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair Villarreal,
Yes,
Commissioner Torres,
Yes,
Commissioner Watkins,
say it again, Commissioner Watkins.
Yes,
okay, Commissioner Hughes,
Yes,
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes,
Commissioner Padilla,
I want to say yes, and then also, Madam Chair, I would strongly recommend that you share your comments taken, or the comments you've noted from this meeting during the session where the governing body is reviewing this. So I will vote yes.
thank you. And Commissioner Marquez,
yes.
thank you.
Right, thank you all. That was, there's a lot. There's a lot. I just feel like there's like a lot of work put in and a lot of like needs and a lot of things that we still can work. So we can wrap up our meeting. Let me just go to our agenda here and anything from Madison staff.
Thank you for holding a special meeting to talk about this. This is super, super helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. It really was. The comments were really, were perfect. So thank you.
Anything else from other staff? When's our next meeting date? That to be determined.
February 3rd, Wednesday in February. Yes,
February 15th.
15th.
Okay. February 15th. So any matters from the committee?
thank you to staff again for great work and diligent work.
Thank you.
thank you, Lee. Thank you, Dan.
And I don't have any matters as the chair, and so we said our next meeting will be on Wednesday, February 15th at 3:30. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Happy
Thanks,
New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.